Tara Dower, great to have you back on the Singletrack Podcast. And yeah, there's a lot to celebrate. But first and foremost, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back. I'm always happy to chat with you.
I guess the first question I have, and I think we should talk about Black Canyon first, is just around goal setting. And I know there's a lot of hard work that is behind the scenes of all of these accolades, but you had, I know that when you re-signed to this Ultra deal, you put your ambition to secure a golden ticket kind of front and center.
hmm
How confident were you that it was going to happen like this fast, like kind of one and done?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was not super confident that I would get it at Black Canyon, but I felt like, with the experience from Black Canyon, the competitive experience that I get there, I could probably get a golden ticket at Canyons.
Okay. So this year, it was like this was going to be the year that you focused on Western, or was this going to be a multi-year journey if necessary?
It was going to be a multi-year. I think I would keep going back to Black Canyon. I think I'm never going to not go to Black Canyon, unfortunately. I love that race because it's so hard and it's just such a grind. Um so I think I would always be on the hunt. But this year is definitely focused on doing Western states, but not just Western states, like a hard rock Western double. Like that is my A goal. If I could do both of them, I would. But I'm seventh on the hard rock wait list, so I'm just patiently waiting. Now that I got the golden ticket, I'm got to get into hard rock.
I was going to say, how much did, well, or sorry, I should say, what would have happened if Western wasn't in the picture this year? How would your schedule be different? Like now that Western is lined up, talk about that.
Yeah, if Western wasn't on the lineup, which I'm going to talk to my coach, Megan, in a little bit. We're going to talk through the year because we were kind of waiting for Black Canyon before we planned a bunch of stuff out. But in my head, if Western States didn't work out, I would probably have just signed up for a bunch of 100s because I love the 100-mile distance. Probably a lot of mountainous 100s, just getting out there in the San Juans or
Yeah.
doing something that brings me joy, and attempting to win those races in some capacity.
One of the things on the media side that we've been talking about is just how competitive Black Canyon has gotten in the past few years and
Oh,
how
yeah.
that's sort of a draw in and of itself. But hearing you talk about it a moment ago, it sounds like your love for that race is sort of deeper than just the competition. And for people that haven't been out there, what is it about that course and that environment that brings you back each year?
Yeah, that race, Black Canyon scares the heck out of me. It's not only, like we mentioned, it's really super competitive, but it's also technical. The rocks move if you step on them. They're all shapes and sizes. If you fall, it's over, not over. Your race isn't over, but you're definitely getting bloody, as I do every single year at Black Canyon. It's mental, physical grind after, I would say, Glory in a Mine. Maybe Glory in a Mine, Deep Canyon, it's a grind after that point. It's not I don't think anyone is I had such a great race at Black Canyon. Everything went to plan because it's just such a grind. And it scares me. And I have this desire to do things that scare me for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm not sure people were, or as many people were still tuned into the live stream when sort of the post race interviews were happening. But
Mhm.
I can't remember the exact question that Corinne Chavoy asked you, but your response was basically these early lows. Like if I'm falling early in the race, these early lows are my bread and butter. So
Yeah.
it sounds like to some extent that environment plays to your, at least your mental strengths a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got a mental, two of my best races now is, Black Canyon 2025 and Run Rabbit Run 2023. Yeah, 2023. I always forget the year. I've done it twice. But it's the year that I won it. And both of those races, I had really early lows, and I wasn't sure if I could compete or even finish. And I just kept going and it ended up being fine. I feel like you can only go up from an early low. I fell so much in the beginning. The first year I did this race, Black Canyon, it was just as bad, but it was more embarrassing because I was around a lot of people and people were like tailing me and in front of me. And so I was falling in front of people. So that was embarrassing.
Yeah.
But this year I was only around a couple people. And I think Erin Clark was right on my tail. She wasn't like right there, but like she could definitely see me falling. And I think I was just like, oh my gosh, I look like a dork right now. And not only a dork, but I'm also getting really bloody and like I kept falling on my right side. So my left side's pretty fine, but my right side is just like scratches, blood all down my arm. Like my hip and my knee is all busted up, and my right hand is busted up as well.
It reminds me, I don't think I asked you about this after the AT, but was this an issue on the AT where you sort of had to keep your body in check? Because I'll give you an example. I was just in New York over the holidays. I was on that section around Bear Mountain, and I think I wrote in my Strava description, I already had respect for you, but I have so much more respect for what you accomplished on that trail, with especially how technical that section is. And it's not even one of the more popular parts of the whole trek, you know?
Yeah, no, it's the whole Northeast. I mean, it's pretty technical. The whole trail is pretty technical, but it was a factor for sure. I fell so often. I don't think I got as bloody because speed mixed with technical trail is a little more dangerous. I wasn't going like super fast, but when I fell, it was just really, really hard. But it wasn't as bad as these falls at Black Canyon.
Before we get into some of the X's and O's around the race itself, I want to backtrack a little bit because again, we last chatted in late September. You were gracious to come on like 48 hours after completing the AT, and I owe a lot of thanks to JP Giblin for that as well. Shout out
Yeah.
JP.
Yeah.
But you know, what you accomplished last fall, I'm pretty sure most people would say was like one of the performances in the history of the sport, like one of the greatest performances. And it's crazy that it happened the same year that Jasmine completed the AT, but just an amazing performance. And if you look at most of the people that have been in your category of accomplishment there, especially around that trail, it's either been a career ender, it's like the last thing they did, or it took them a long time to bounce back. And you know, we're 4.5 months removed from that, and you just took a golden ticket at probably, if not the most competitive, like the second most competitive ultra on U.S. soil. I
Yeah.
want to start there. Like, talk to me about how you got yourself ready to bounce back that fast for this.
Yeah, I think just at the beginning, at the genesis, is that desire to go fast and to get a golden ticket. I think that's the first place that I started from, and that fuels me to go faster on my training runs, to recover faster after the AT, to eat, to rest, to just not run in the very beginning right after I finished. I think there were, this has been mentioned several times, there was 30 women that could have won or gotten in the top 3
Yep.
for this race. And it's just the right factors, it's the right formula for the day, and it's who, wasn't experiencing, GI distress, or who weren't affected by the heat. And I don't really know where I was going with that, but I think it's just, it's not up to chance. Like, I worked really hard for this. I worked extremely hard. But I knew it was a possibility I wouldn't be there, but I really wanted to test that. And I wanted to show people like these things are possible. I feel so often that we make up these narratives and it limits a lot of people. The more it's perpetuated, more people are talking like, oh, it's not possible to do that. It's like, why has anyone tried? I don't know if anyone has tried. So I just want to like prove people wrong, not only to show people like I am capable and I'm able to do this, but also just show what's possible for people in general. And I want to break down those barriers.
For people that haven't followed maybe as closely as you have or I have, would you say one of those narratives is sort of like the pipeline of thru hikers to competitive ultras?
Yeah. I feel like it could go one or two directions with thru hikers. They're either going to climbing, like rock climbing or they're going to ultras.
But talk about some of the changes you made. I mean, obviously you've been a great athlete in the sport. You're very accomplished. You mentioned the Run Rabbit Run result, Umstead. You've run some fast marathons. So like this isn't out of nowhere. But again, like just sticking to that whole theme around like it was a fairly quick turnaround. What were some of the like strategic things that you did, like maybe bringing on coaches, stuff like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Great. First off, I mean, the physical things, like the actual tangible things I did, first off was get a manager who helped me negotiate a great contract with Altra. And through that support I received from my sponsors, in there was an amount of money I could use for a nutritionist, for, a mindset coach, and for a like a PT and strength coach. And so that's exactly what I did. I wanted to use that money. I want to invest back into my sport to get better. It takes all of these factors, all of them together to make a solid racer. So I worked with Vic Johnson pretty much for like 2 months. We would have a call every week, and the call should have lasted only an hour, but it ended up lasting way longer because we were just so stoked to be. I mean, he was stoked to be talking about nutrition, and I wanted to absorb all of it because I have a lot of issues around nutrition and racing. I broke my tradition of throwing up at every single race. At this
That's
race,
huge.
I didn't throw up once, and that's crazy. I didn't feel sick either. I didn't feel overstuffed. I didn't feel low. I didn't bonk, and that's huge. So thanks to Vic Johnson, Cameron Harder out of Flagstaff, he was the PT strength coach, and he worked a lot on helping me with mobility and stability. And who knows how much more I would have fallen if I didn't work on that stability and mobility with him. And then my mindset coach, Danielle, she helped me stay in the zone. We worked through some techniques I could use out there on the course because it's going to get hard. It does not get hard out on Black Canyon's course, at least for me. I don't want to speak for everyone. And, Kelly has just helped me keep my head screwed on tight and, help me stay organized. So I think it starts there with the tangible things of getting a team behind you to help optimize your performance. And then, obviously with Megan, we've worked together for the last year. We started working together this time last year, and she has just put a lot of speed. She knows my desire to go fast after the AT, and she understands the female body, and we can kind of decipher when I'm a little low. Like I got super sick. What was it? Like a month and a half, 2 months ago, got super sick. So we just went down in training, and she was checking up on me. But after I got better, we just ramped up the training and ramped up the speed. And so it just takes that entire team, and then executing after going through all that training and getting all that help. It's then executing the race. And that's all it is. It's just execution.
Amazing. Starting with is this Danielle Snyder, the mindset coach?
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned some of the techniques that she had you deploy out there on race day. What were some of those techniques?
Yeah. So something she talks a lot about, I mean, first off, she creates a very comfortable space. Like I've had a very turbulent year. 2024 was just a very turbulent year. It's just a lot of changes in my life, and she just creates a very comfortable space. So I feel open to tell her anything, like even stuff that might feel like, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't judge me. She doesn't judge. So off the bat, I feel comfortable with her. Something she does is say, like, if you are having a low moment, let's not catastrophize that. Let's take 5 minutes. You can feel bad for yourself for 5 minutes, but in that 5 minutes, you're going to drink, you're going to eat, and you're just going to go at a pace that feels manageable for that moment. And then after 5 minutes, it's time to turn it back on. So I did that. I had a lot of, during Black Canyon, I had pretty much for 50 miles, from like 10 miles to the end, I had this hamstring tightness that just pulled on like the back of my knee and like my calf. And it was just like kind of really painful. But it was just like every time I felt that, when it came up and it was like, alarming, I would just take the time, just a little reset, and then get back into it after 5 minutes. We also come up with words, and that really helps me during a race. So the word of the race was comatose. So those are just some things that we do. And yeah, she's great. She is definitely a great mindset coach. I don't know if I would have had success in Umstead without her. Black Canyon, the Appalachian Trail, Hard Rock. She's there for all of those.
What's the significance of comatose?
Well, okay, so we were trying to figure out words, and then I remembered a video I watched recently. It was just a really short little reel video, and it was this marathon coach talking about how his athletes, it's like they just go into a comatose state, and all it is just thriving in that comatose state and just like, turning off your brain and moving efficiently. And Shay actually had a similar saying, I guess. She I loved her saying better, but she said smooth brain. So smooth brain is just like no curves, no waves in the brain, just like simple thoughts only, and you're just one foot in front of the other.
That's amazing. And one last thing on the mindset piece is this something that, for example, your manager Kelly is recommending to you? Is this something that you had been actively kind of researching, seeking out for a while now? I'm curious how this aspect of high performance sort of falls into your camp.
Yeah, before Run Rabbit, the second year I did it, I guess it was 2023. It definitely was 2023, but I was really freaking out for some reason, and I recognized that I had some work to do. And after I started working with Megan, I think she can just recognize when my mindset isn't as strong. And so she recommended me initially to go to Danielle. And then me and Danielle, after Hard Rock, we stopped working together because the AT was coming up, and I felt pretty comfortable. And then it was a couple weeks before the race, and I think Megan could sense like there was some concern and some anxiety popping up for me, and she just knows me really well and can recognize that, and suggested I go back and see Danielle.
Awesome. And then with Vic, we've had Vic on the podcast, super informative episode, and I've had the sort of opportunity to work with him for the past few months with my own personal stuff. So I do have some sense here, but I still think there's so much value to give to the audience. When, like you mentioned, that he sort of helped solve the issue of throwing up, like you weren't throwing up at Black Canyon, which is huge, right? Like for anyone that's pushing the envelope performance wise, you're really riding that line nutritionally. What were some of the things that you learned, like in training with him, that made race day more predictable?
I think it's like a lot of like really niche things, like things I wouldn't have realized, but then it's also things I'm like really simple things, like you should be eating the amount of carbs that you plan on racing with. I just, for some reason, I was like, oh yeah, I don't need that many. Maybe I'll take one gel during a 20-mile run. But he taught me that, you want to prepare your body to accept those carbs, to absorb them. And so during my training runs for, what is it, like two months, I was just like eating a bunch, drinking a lot, just filling up my stomach as much as I can, and then still trying to move really fast. During long runs, during speed work, he was just having me fill up completely. And I think that just prepared my body to accept those carbs. But then we also did sweat rate testing. I got an H drop sensor that helps me detect that rate, and like sodium levels as well. And he also helped me decipher why I keep throwing up during races. And I think it's for a lot of people with ultra running, I don't think we realize that we don't hydrate as well. And I always thought I was a pretty good hydrator. I thought it was just like my body does not like food during racing, but it's really, I'm just not hydrating enough. And So he had me drinking a lot more. And that was the key. The first half of the race, I did a lot of like liquid calories and hydrated. And then from Deep Canyon on, I did gels and I just did water and salt tabs. So he helped me like crack that code, and I was pretty impressed that I didn't throw up or even feel sick.
I feel like I'm just going down the laundry list, but I think what I'm trying to get at here is you've really built this impressive high performance team, and we see a lot of other athletes doing this too. Katie Scheid comes to mind, John Ray through CTS. Talking about Cam Harder, Ridge Athletics. I don't know if as many people know him either. How are you working with him? What are the ways that he's really benefited you?
Yeah, he's a friend of Vic's, and Vic recommended I just follow him at least on Instagram, and followed him. And he reached out and he asked me like if there was anything I felt like I could work on, and he's like I could help with that when I told him the things that I thought I could work on. And we've been working together, and he's awesome. I mean, he's got a really easy, he sets me up with like this app that's really easy to follow. He shows he makes videos on every single workout and includes them in every single workout, makes a personalized plan for me every day. And it's not like I'm lifting or anything. It's like I'm doing mobility and stability work that seems, some of these workouts, I'm just like stepping up on like a large step and just leaning into my leg. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what can this do? But it did a lot. I felt really good going week after week with these workouts and doing them consistently. It's like, wow, I'm actually, not that I'm flexible, like I'm more flexible, but it's not in the way that like, I like to use the analogy, like the rubber bands are not like being stretched out completely. It just feels like this optimal, like this balance between like stretching them out, being flexible, but not stretching them out so much that you injure yourself. But yeah, he's great. He's very responsive. Saw him at the race. I think he was crewing. Was it Craig? No. Was it Craig Hunt? No. I forget who it was.
They're both Flagstaff, I think, so that would make sense.
Yeah, he was there. And we talked after the race because I had that hamstring issue, and I was dealing with that before the race. I had a lot of tightness in the hamstring, so I knew it was a possibility it would come up. So talked to him after the race. He was like, we're going to work on that. We're going to get you ready for states.
Do you have all these people talking to each other? Like, will Megan know what Vic is saying, and will Cam know what like Megan is saying, stuff like that? Or are you sort of orchestrating all of the messaging?
I'm orchestrating a lot of that. They all know each other or know of each other. And they know I'm working with all of them. So they ask, like, for instance, Megan asked, like, okay, what does Vic think about like this amount of sodium? Then I'll go back to Vic and we'll talk about like caffeine, like how much caffeine. And so I'm kind of like the in-between person, but they do know that I'm like working, and those are like that specific person's specialty, and they'll respect it.
And then, so we had Kelly Newland and Abby Levine on the show back in early January, because it was just, Abby wrote the story, sort of breaking the news around your contract with Altra. And I think a lot of people in the audience, they might have an understanding that if you have an agent like Kelly, maybe the relationship is constrained to just sort of that negotiating process. And then you reconvene maybe when your contract is up and you're looking to re-sign or explore the market or take next steps, whatever. But you alluded to the idea that you guys are still working together in the midst of the contract, and she's sort of like, if not a daily presence, like a fairly frequent presence in your career. So talk about that.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, but Kelly hasn't left yet, so that's a good sign. No, Kelly's awesome. I didn't really know what that relationship would look like after the whole negotiating process, but she's really been there. She's been there she asked me, she told me, she was like, if you feel overwhelmed, put in, like, I have this work email, I guess, and I have my personal email, but they're kind of the same thing. But she told me for the work one, put in like a vacation notice that if this is a media inquiry, because I was getting a lot of media inquiries for the Appalachian Trail, tell them like in the vacation notes, like, hey, I won't respond as quickly to emails, but if this is an inquiry for media, please reach out to my agent, Kelly Newland, at Rad Boulder. And so she's like vetted a lot of like media opportunities. She's helped organize. I mean, she called me today and I think she was doing it in a sly way, but I don't remember what she was calling me for initially, but she was like, oh, and also we have a call at 1. I know you already know about this call at 1 o'clock with Colby from Ultra, but the call is at 1 and there's a Zoom. And I think she's just politely saying like, hey, I know you're tired, but we still have this call. So she's like keeping me like organized in midst of all of this, like crazy time, emails and texts and everything. And she's just so open to give me advice and just be there to listen to me. Again, with Danielle is a listening ear, but I think Kelly like also creates that safe space for me to feel open to tell her what's going on in my life. And that's nice as somebody who's so involved in the sport and so involved with the community of ultra running. She understands.
I promise we'll get to Black Canyon stuff, but I'm interested. What's the story behind how you and Kelly met?
Yeah, I was on Debo's podcast, and then after the podcast, I was like, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know anyone that does management for managers for ultra runners specifically?"
Wow.
And he connected me with Kelly.
Awesome. And this would this been like pretty soon after the AT?
Yeah,
Okay.
probably a week or two.
And
Weeks.
were you on a 1 year with Altra at that time?
Yeah,
Okay. Wow.
yeah,
And like basically like the conversation just goes like you're impressed and you want to work together.
yeah, yeah. It was kind of funny. I was in Ward, Colorado after the Appalachian Trail. My friend Grayson and Tina were going to go hike the Ice Age Trail and they needed somebody to watch their cats in Ward. And it was on the top of this mountain, like 40 minutes outside of Boulder. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Sounds like somewhere I could like relax and not have, to deal with Virginia Beach, which is insane. So I rested a lot there. And that's when I did the Debo podcast and reached out to Kelly after that. And she's like, yeah, I'm near Boulder as well. We can meet in Boulder. She's like, I'm 40 minutes outside. I was like, where do you live? She was like, oh, I'm in Ward. I was like, where specifically? It turns out she's like a 5-minute drive in this random cabin on the top of a mountain. Like both of us are in this random community. It turns out she was just right down the road. So I went over there and talked with her and she just knew what she was talking about. And I learned so much just in that first initial meeting. And I was a little nervous to partner with her just because for a long time, ultra running has just been like something I'm doing on the side and I'm not getting paid a whole lot of money. So I really had to extremely budget. I had to like find ways to feed myself. And
Mm.
I had to have part-time jobs just to like fund these races. And obviously Ultra helped last year a bit with that. But I was a little nervous to partner with her because there was that like, you do have to pay your agent, your manager,
Yes.
that percentage. So I was nervous. I was like, I don't even know like if I would be making that much money in order to like live, sustain myself and pay her. So I was like, that's what I told her. I told her my concern and she's like, we're gonna make sure you get what you deserve. And without her, I don't think I would have felt like confident to, say how much I thought I was worth or how much
Mm.
Kelly believed I was worth. And so it's for me, it was definitely worth it to have her on board and to have her expertise. I mean, she knows so much. She knows everyone in the game. She's so well connected and she's fiercely loyal. I think everyone appreciates a loyal person, but loyalty is very important to me. And she is the epitome of loyalty.
Obviously, it was a great investment on your part. I feel like a lot of people are debating it in the sport right now, people that are in a similar position to you. Do you feel like in this day of age, even if you're concerned that like it's the investment is not quite worth the size of the contract you could get, like are you pretty pro agent? Like would you encourage most athletes to kind of go down this route? Or is it
I think
complicated?
I think it depends on the athlete. Like Kelly has told me this before. I've asked her the same question. I think it definitely depends on the athlete. I don't think everyone needs an agent, but it's definitely helpful. I think just for the simple fact that you don't have to be negotiating your worth to somebody to skip that awkward conversation, I think it's worth it in that sense.
One thing, we chatted so soon after the AT, that I guess it wouldn't have made sense to ask this question then, but we're like 4 months removed now. On the media side of things and sort of like the publicity side of things, how did you process all of those requests and just like demands on your attention? Like looking back, was it something that you enjoyed? Was it a burden? Like looking back on it, what was
I
that
think
period from like September to November like?
I think it can be two things. It can be overwhelming and daunting, and it can also be exciting. And I was really thankful for that attention, not only because, obviously it's great for my career, but it's great for women in endurance sports to be getting highlighted like that. Like there's a lot of eyes on women's sports, and I was really thankful for that. But it was really daunting. It really did feel at like points that people were just constantly trying to get my attention, and trying to be on my radar, and it was kind of a constant stream. And I know that wasn't anyone's intention to overwhelm me or anything. That's not their intention. I'm aware of that, but on those days where it was just constant, it was overwhelming. And coming from, I've said this several times, but coming from the Appalachian Trail, where your only goal is so simple, all you have to do is move forward. My crew did everything else. All I had to do was move and complete a goal every single day. Coming from such a simple thing to then a very obscure, abstract recovery and a goal of like getting the attention out about the FKT, it was there was no end to it. It didn't seem like there was any end in sight, and it was overwhelming. It was good, but I think it can be two things at once. It was also extremely overwhelming.
If you could paint a picture of, for example, a random day in October when you're recovering, but you're getting like how like booked up was your schedule? Like if you could paint that picture.
Yeah. So I was in ward. I was thankful to be in ward in this cabin. But I'd wake up and have breakfast, but pretty much like 9 a.m. I would have a podcast call or a podcast Zoom, Riverside, whatever it was, and then have a little break and then go into another one. On average, I had about 2 to 3 a day podcasts, or just talking with somebody, and they lasted at most, like one lasted like an hour and a half, which was kind of my like outer edges of what I'm comfortable with about talking about the Appalachian Trail, but doing that 3 times a day is and saying the same things over and over. It's a lot, but they mostly lasted an hour. And then I would just try to recover from doing all of that talking, because I'm not an extrovert and I'm not an introvert, but I think talking with that many people a day about the same thing can be exhausting.
Did you get like when you were starting? Like I know you, at least like as a fan and peripheral friend, I know you somewhat well, and we've talked in person a couple times. And if someone were to ask me to describe you, I would say you lead with a tremendous amount of stoke for the sport, and you've loved the AT, so like it was a natural evolution for you to go and do that thing. But did you have any sense ahead of time the gravity of the achievement and like the ways it would change your life? Because you talked about having to sacrifice a lot, all these part-time jobs, and now you're in your current position. So curious to kind of get your take there.
Yeah. I didn't think it would have I didn't think about the end at all during the entire Appalachian Trail. Um, I didn't know what it would look like afterwards. I wasn't doing this for the media. I wasn't doing this to get attention or anything. Um, and by the end of it, it was a lot. It was almost too much attention. I was doing it because I love the Appalachian Trail and I felt like I might have a chance to get the FKT, and it would be really cool to also have a southbound hike on top of a Nobo hike, and to say I'm a 2-time Appalachian Trail through hiker. That would be really cool to say. It would be cool to say I also set the FKT at one point on the Appalachian Trail. But the media response was not why I was doing it. And when I finished, I mean, we talked about this, how I was like not expecting to get the record up into the last 3 miles. Like I wasn't thinking that was going to happen. So I wasn't mentally preparing for the end, and then it came, and it was so much, and it was so much for so many weeks. I mean, a solid 6, 7, 8 weeks of just constant Appalachian Trail conversations, which is good. I love the Appalachian Trail, so it wasn't like something I was not stoked about. The Appalachian Trail got a lot of eyes on it. Girls on the Run got a lot of eyes on them. Women in endurance sports had a lot of attention on that. So a lot of good came out of it. But it was just so much media.
Right. You're probably also fielding a lot of announcements from runners who are saying, "Hey, Tara, just so you know, I'm going after the record this week." You
Oh
must
my
have some
gosh,
inside
yeah.
knowledge around who's
Yeah.
who's thinking about it for 25.
I am. Yeah. I've got a lot. I've got a lot for the PCT and the AT. So
Is the AT? You don't have to name names, but is the AT going to have a legitimate amount of activity from people with solid backgrounds in the sport?
yeah, supported and self-supported.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
several, many people.
I saw
I
Jeff
would love to
Garmeyer, which I'm excited
Jeff
about.
Garmeyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see more women. Haven't had a woman reach out yet. I would
Interesting.
love to see more women out there. So if there's any women listening, you want to make, I would love to talk to you about doing an Appalachian Trail FKT. I think women can do it better than men.
You know what? This reminds me. It's so interesting. We just interviewed Lazarus Lake, Berkeley
Mm,
Marathons, and
yeah.
we were talking about sort of like the impact that Jasmine had on the Barkley. And I don't know how, I don't know exactly how true this is, but he said to us, based on all of the number of applications that he's seen for this year, they had a record low number of female applicants, which kind of blows my mind.
No
I would have thought
way.
that this would have opened up the floodgates for, yeah,
Yeah,
apparently,
interesting.
I don't know, wild. So like a part of me wonders, like, given how impressive your accomplishment was, because you do see this sometimes in the FKT scene, at least for a couple of years, where like someone throws down a wild time and then people feel, at least for a couple of years, like that route is quote unquote closed. And then it takes sort of like the self-belief that you talked about
Mhm.
earlier from some individual to kind of restoke the fire for the route.
Mhm.
Uh, a part of me wonders if like maybe that's the case for Barkley, maybe with the AT, if there haven't been any females on the radar yet,
Mhm.
you can just put down a great time. I don't know, but that shocked me when I heard that.
Wow. Yeah, I would have totally thought it was opposite.
Yeah. Um, okay. Last thing I promised before Black Canyon, you moved to Durango, and it's interesting. When I saw you last year, you were living the van life. You were crisscrossing the U.S. You could probably move anywhere you wanted to. Talk about like the why for Durango.
Durango is there's so many reasons to be in Durango. I mean, Colorado, I just wanted to relocate to Colorado specifically. I mean, I could be in Durango, I could be close to Arizona for a lot of Viper races. Also, everywhere in Colorado where there's races, I could be there in 6, 7 hours. Um, also, my friend Reese, I wouldn't have moved here if I didn't have a support system already in place. My friend Reese, who people probably see her in a lot of my videos, a lot of my pictures. She looks like Rascal. She's not Rascal. I have 2 best friends that look identical. They're both small people with glasses and usually wear braids. But Reese is usually there for a lot of these really tough races like Hard Rock, and she's been there for Black Canyon. She's seen the progression of Black Canyon. And she is just one of my best friends. She's a great support system. So if she's here, San Juans are an hour up the road. Love the San Juans. Silverton's right up there. And there is like a really solid trail running community here. So like Maggie is here, Kyle, one of my teammates, Kyle, Robin, Sarah, they're all here. And there's a solid running club here. I haven't been to any of their runs yet, but definitely plan on going. So a lot of reasons to be here.
Amazing. Yeah. And there's a couple cool races that have been on my radar. The San Juan Softy. Have you heard of that one? It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
just south of Hard Rock. Like there was a year where I was like, am I ever going to get into Hard Rock? Maybe not, but maybe I go do that or what is it? The High Five. There's
Yeah.
another kind of like lower key 100 in the area.
Well, it's funny. Kyle says that Hard Rock is not actually the hardest race in the San Juans, so that's exciting too. Like you have Uray. There's so many races that you could
Wait, what's
do.
his opinion? What's the hardest?
Oh, I don't know what he thinks the hardest is. I just remember reading something, one of his posts saying like Hard Rock is definitely not the hardest thing you could do in the San Juans,
Gotcha.
which
Yeah,
is kind of
the Uray
wild to
course
think
looks wild.
of.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the race. And
Mhm.
you said earlier that there on that start line there were 30 to 40 women that on any given day could have won the race, golden ticketed, etc. So you're on that start line. Um, is it fair to say that you're just there to race? Like you famously don't really put your eye on the prize until it's like kind of there at the end. So talk
Mhm.
about sort of like your mindset on the start line.
Yeah, I mean, right at the beginning, it was just like I didn't feel a lot of anxiety in the races that are just so packed with competitors. I'm not thinking, I don't have as much anxiety. I know the race really well. So really the word going through my head at the very beginning is execution. All you need to do is execute all these pieces of the race. If you can execute it, you might have a chance at getting one of those golden tickets. Might. You could have the best day and you might get outkicked at the very end. So I just had to put together all the pieces and execute the nutrition and the pacing and even not just the pacing, like my personal pacing, but also race the race. If somebody's ahead of you, like you got to race them. You can't just be like, oh, well, on my chart, it says I have to run a 8:10 in this mile, but you got to race the race. If you want that golden ticket, aggression in the very beginning is so important for Black Canyon, I will say. I usually can go into a race and be like, oh, I can kind of like work my way up with my own race, but like aggression and racing the race is so important in Black Canyon.
I was gonna say I didn't get a chance to tune into the live stream until Bumblebee, and then I was there from Bumblebee to the finish. So yeah, talk
Mhm.
about those first 20 miles because I think what you said there about aggression is so key. Like in a lot of ways, you really can't race your own race, right? Like however things are flowing that day with the people around you, you kind of have to either set the tone or match.
Yeah. Yeah, the first 20 miles for me, I mean, it was okay. It wasn't the best. Got to say hi and hang out with a lot of ladies. Like got to talk to Shay a little bit, Annie, saw Bree out there and Lauren. Got to talk a little bit. I didn't actually talk to Abby. Didn't talk to Lynn, but I was racing around them. Got to see Heather a little bit, race behind her, and she was behind me at some point. We just kind of like were around each other. So got to say hi to a lot of these ladies and hang out for the first like 10-ish miles. It was fine. Then the falling began, started getting a little bloody, getting a little like worked up. Had to like bring myself back to that center and, not catastrophize that. Like it's a long race. Anything could happen. It's just a little blood. It doesn't really hurt. Let's just keep moving at whatever pace feels like comfortably challenging. That was another thought with the pacing was like what's challenging but like still sustainable. Um the hamstring started to hurt. That was alarming. It started like going to the back of my knee and then my calf was getting really tight. Again, just trying not to catastrophize that. Um, and just moving well. I remember like towards the end near Bumblebee, I was running around Shay, Abby Hall, Lynn, and Graham, who's married to Corinne, who's with the feed. I was running around all of them and and Becca Bramley, who's in Durango. And we were kind of off leapfrogging off of each other, trying to figure out pace. And I was going way faster than what my pace chart said. But again, like I was not holding so tightly onto that because it's an aggressive race. You got to race the race. So I was just going at whatever pace felt like comfortably challenging. We got into Bumblebee and everyone kind of split up. MK was around us at that point. She was like a little bit ahead, but I got out of the aid station, I think before all of them, and we were all kind of in a pack, sort of a pack together as we were leaving Bumblebee, but I was a little ahead.
It's interesting to me that even though you're all well under course record pace, it felt at most comfortably challenging to you.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of factors to that. I mean, I'm living at altitude now. I'm not living at 0 feet in Virginia Beach. So I'm living at 6,500. So that 7-minute pace felt a lot easier. Especially what is it? Like 4,000 at Meyer, right? It's around 4,000, 3,000 at Meyer.
Yeah.
So, it just felt like easier. And as we kept going down, it felt better.
Wait, so moving west is performance enhancing, is what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. I talked to Megan about that, and she was like, yeah, most ultra runners are like living these higher places or just like at something, like not just 0. It does help a lot. It helps a lot. There's so much air to breathe. So much air to breathe.
I interrupted you, though. I apologize.
Oh, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, at least thinking about the sort of like when things separate, talk about sort of like the when, why, how there, like how you get into this position where you're kind of solo running for such a large portion of the race until the finish, at least from what I could tell. It was sort of like you kind of on an island in second, at least from like, what was it, like mile 30-ish onward?
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, it was around then because, I was with that big group, and then we went up that after Bumblebee. There's that like famous little technical uphill, just a little jaunt up this hill, and then you're kind of going through the canyon and just running around the cactus and stuff. And I saw Heather ahead of me, and I think I saw Riley at some point. Never saw Mary, and I was just like saw Heather and just kind of set my sights on her to get her next, and was keeping track of my breathing and how the pace fell. I didn't want to go over something that felt like unsustainable, but I kept getting closer and closer past her. And then shortly after that, I passed Mary on this downhill. And once I passed Mary, I wanted to create a lot of space, and it was on a downhill, and I'm pretty good at downhill. So I just like really opened up my pace. I think I was hitting like 640s at that point on this downhill, just like, trying to create as much space as possible so she didn't see me again. And if she was still like in the race, she wouldn't think I was close. And then we went up, and I saw JP, who I'm sure a lot of people know is one of my really good friends, and we just have the best time together. And I saw him, and he was having that pain that he was experiencing at Javelina. And race wasn't quite going his way, unfortunately. But I saw him, and we tried to run together a little bit. But I was just so hyped from seeing him that also boosted me. And I just started running a lot faster after passing him into Deep Canyon. And at that point, after I passed JP, I just didn't see another woman racer. I saw Riley a couple times up on like some hills where I like looked up and I could see her or see them going up the trail. But other than that, like I didn't see anyone else. Riley took off at a point, and I never saw them again after Black Canyon City, a little shortly after that uphill on Black Canyon City, because you can still see a lot of people making their way up the mountain. But I didn't see Riley after that. They knew I was on the hunt, I think.
I was going to ask, I think psychologically, one thing I'm interested in is once you sort of get onto that island where there aren't people around you, because you end up finishing 20 minutes plus under the previous Keely Henninger course record.
Mhm.
Riley is even farther under that. But how do you like? Are you motivated by holding off third, fourth place? Are you in this chase attack mode still, holding out hope that you can run down Riley? Talk about that.
Yeah, it's a little of both. So I knew that MK, such a strong runner. I was watching or worried about, I guess, slightly worried. I wasn't like extremely worried. Just a thought in the back of my head, something to keep track of was, especially in that Black Canyon City aid station, like I wanted to track where they were behind me in the race. So I was really looking at MK and Lynn. I knew they're closers and they're really strong runners. Everyone, all those women are strong runners, but those were the two I was specifically looking at. And they were, I would say they're at that point like 7 minutes behind me. And so I was keeping track of that and I wanted to create space there, but I was also extremely motivated to catch Riley. I wanted to catch Riley so bad. Um, we're buds and just love racing against Riley. They are such a competitor, so fierce on those courses like Javelina, Black Canyon, just so fierce, so strong. And I knew we could get a lot out of each other if I was chasing them down and like we could just like put down some real solid time. So I think we were like, I don't want to speak for Riley, but I was really motivated to catch them and to get the most out of myself.
Is there anything, and it seemed like the day went pretty smooth for you, but looking back on it, are there any things that you would have executed on differently? Were there any weaknesses that kind of shined through that you want to work on in training before Western, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously fix my hamstring, get that feeling better because I feel it right now and it's like so swollen. My leg is like so swollen on the back of it. So I obviously want to get that fixed. I think I want to keep working on my mindset. I think the second you think like, oh, I'm good, like my mindset's like solid, I think for me, that's the point where, things could again go downhill. So I want to always work on that mindset, keep getting strong there. Um, I think Black Canyon is just one of those races where it's a grind. It's not straightforward. It's hard. And I think working on that mindset to realize like something like Western, I think is I've never done it, but it's similar. The heat is similar. It's hot and it's just a grind and it's just getting through the long, long day and trying to run as efficiently and as strong as possible. I don't think there's any weaknesses. There were some like hiccups in pacing and hiccups with the crew. Not serious. I think there's a couple things we forgot at Bumblebee. Um, the crewing was a little weird at Deep Canyon. It was a little awkward with them because you couldn't be like in front of this fence. You had to be behind a fence to crew. And they were all like, my crew was all trying to do their own job. And it was just hard over this fence. Um, so that was a little awkward. And then Rachel Lemke was pacing me. Natalie and Rachel paced me, but Rachel Lemke, um, like fell at one point. She hit somebody, she fell and busted up her knee. And then a bike, one of those bike cameras, like ran into the back of her foot, I think. And she like couldn't catch me after that, and that was really upsetting. Like it was fine, and that was after Black Canyon City. It ended up being fine, but I just like I think obviously trying to limit all of those factors. I mean, you can't do anything about a bike hitting you though. There's not a lot you can do about that.
Well, you mentioned some of the crew experiences. One of the coolest things that Emily Cameron, great photographer, videographer in the scene,
Mm-hmm.
got on camera was this pretty efficient looking pack swap that you did. I don't know if it was at Deep Canyon because they were behind the fence there, but
It was.
it looked pretty like you kind of jump into the pack and like you get it and like you. I mean, if they weren't putting sunscreen on you and stuff, you could have been out there in like 5 seconds. Like the
Mm-hmm.
transition looked kind of cool.
Yeah, like Bumblebee was the same way. I think Bumblebee took like 2 seconds. I was really motivated by Rachel Drake at JFK. Watching Rachel and Tyler, their transitions was eye opening. So just trying to make sure you have everything you need that you want to keep on your person. Like I put things, for instance, like my AirPods in my bra, and took it out of my pack. And all I had to do was take off the pack, get a new pack, and go. You can get water, like I can spray water on myself at like the like actual aid station, if I need to, but there's no reason to stay there more than a couple seconds in my mind. The Deep Canyon aid station, that one you saw, was efficient, but it was a little awkward. We were just trying to do so much from behind a fence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm sort of understanding all of this correctly, it seems like everything you invested in from sort of like the high performance team standpoint seemed to pay off pretty big time at Black Canyon. And if there's anything you have to work on, it seems like it's mostly minor. I mean, mindset is always a constant, but like slight logistical things, it seems
Mm-hmm.
like you're selling this high performance package pretty well, I think, to a lot of pros that are listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much that goes into racing. It's not just moving forward as fast as you can, even though it's fun to think about it as like getting to point A to point B the fastest. There is so much that goes into it, especially a race as long as Black Canyon and on such a unpredictable day. I think there's so many factors there. Um, I think it's possible to do it without all like this entire team. For anyone that's listening, like I know if I had listened to this podcast when I was maybe just starting out and paying for races with my part-time job and trying to make a name for myself by going to these races and thinking like, oh, I'll never measure up to an athlete who's sponsored. I don't think that's true. I think if anything, Black Canyon showed us like it's possible. Like I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Will Murray, he's not sponsored. Riley isn't sponsored. Riley, it does
Wild.
work. Riley works with Vic, but like you also don't need to have this entire team behind you to find success. I think it's helpful. It works for me because I'm a visual learner. I'm somebody who learns from people. I learn from asking questions. So it's easy for me, but there's plenty of information out there on all of these publications, YouTube, about carbs, about what you can do. Um, you can analyze your own sweat rate. I think it's definitely possible to perform really well without a an entire team. I think it's just personal. I don't want people to listen to this and think that they have to drop thousands of dollars to be the best athlete, because if anything, Black Canyon showed us like both of those are possible. Like you can have a whole team and be successful. You could also not have a huge team and be successful.
Mm. Yeah, I guess, and again, this is all conjecture, and it probably some of it probably has to do with whether or not you're already chasing marginal gains on the way to the top, as opposed to making like big changes in performance. But I've always wondered if there's sort of like a special energy that people like Will and Riley
Mm-hmm.
can tap into on their way to the top that maybe expires once they're there, and at that
Mm-hmm.
point they need to like invest in people around them to chase the final 1, 2, 3% and maintain the motivation. So I don't know if that's true, but that's something it's sort of an open thought out there.
That's a
Um,
great point.
I don't know. And for you, like, did you feel like there was like a special hunger maybe prior to like November of this year that you benefited from? And it could still be there, but like now that you're a pro, the mindset is different.
Yeah, I think I am always motivated by like dirtbag like people, and dirtbag in like the most endearing sense, not meaning in any bad terms, like a hiker trash, for instance. I always think it's so endearing when, people come from through hiking and they're, getting into the sport. And I love looking back at like my times in the van where I was traveling on a budget, trying to go to all these races on a budget. And I got free race entries because I won a competition, and I drove all the way to Ohio and stayed in my van in the freezing cold. And it's fun and it's a cute story. And I love that. It's just a lot easier now that I have a support system, and it's different. It's different. And I can still bring a lot of that dirtbag way into like my racing now, just doing it in a more responsible way.
A couple more questions before we close up. So just to create sort of like an image here, like there were a lot of different finishes on Saturday. One that sticks out to me is Joe McConaughey. He's been on
Mm,
this 8 or 9 year odyssey to get the ticket. Like, I'm pretty
hmm.
sure he was trying to get a ticket when Jim Walmsley was entering the sport. Like, I saw his name on the
Wow.
2016 or 17 Gorge Waterfalls 100K list,
Wow.
and I think he got like fourth or fifth in that race. Anyways, he's been fighting for years, and it's been like a Greek tragedy. Finally gets it this year. So he has a certain experience at that finish line, a certain level of emotion. I'm curious to get yours because, again, like, you stated this goal, but you achieved it pretty quickly. So what does it feel like? And I feel like I asked this at the beginning of the conversation, but just like we've talked for an hour, and like maybe more thoughts have come to mind. Like, what does it feel like to achieve the goal so quickly? Does it still feel special and like this massive weight off your back?
Yeah, it feels extremely special. I'm impressed by so many athletes, men, women, uh, who get those golden tickets, the stories that come out of those races, people who've gotten the tickets, their story of their race. So it's always been something I've looked up to. So to be one of those people, it means like getting a golden ticket, in my mind, is like one of the biggest honors in American United States ultra running. I mean, you can get golden tickets at other international races, but like it's just so special, and I still can't believe it. I've worked hard for it, so I can believe it because I worked really hard for it. But it's like if I just zoom all the way out, it's like, wow, I did that with the help of this crew, with these pacers, with the team I have around me. They all helped me get to this point. I'm extremely thankful. I think when I set a goal out, I I set goals that seem a little scary, but also I make a plan for it to be attainable. And I think I did that with that team that I assembled. And when I make a goal, I'm going to make it happen. And it might be like, I didn't know if it was going to be like a Joe story where I'd have to wait several years to get it, but I was pretty dedicated to getting a golden ticket one day and just racing Western states. And it happened very quickly. And it's at Black Canyon, which I thought was impossible. And here we are.
From the view, watching the live stream, it looks like a lot of pandemonium because you finish. Obviously, you have to kind of collect yourself, and then you have Craig waiting there with the gold, like the literal golden ticket. I'm sure after that they have to whisk you away to drug testing.
Oh, yeah.
What was the conversation with Craig like? Like, do you remember anything he said initially? Like, is it pretty straightforward? Is there like any recapping going on? What's happening there?
Yeah, I honestly forgot about the golden ticket. I was really stoked to be done with the race and to get second at Black Canyon. But for some reason, I just like slightly forgot. So I turned around after thanking my crew and hugging them. And there he was waiting with the golden ticket. I was like, oh my gosh, no way. Walked up to him and he's like, we haven't met yet. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm Tara. And he's like, I know. And I'm Craig. I was like, I know. So that was just a fun little conversation. Then he was like, we were both holding the ticket and he was like, do you want to go? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll go. And that was it. And then, yeah, the drug testers, he came up and he said, you have been chosen to be drug tested. And he whisked me away. And I was like, oh, I forgot about that too. It's a high honor to be drug tested. So it was kind of cool.
I meant to ask this earlier, and again, you're in a unique position because at least in February 2025, we haven't had many like press released public conversations about relatively massive new deals in the sport. Like, your contract is kind of on a spotlight. In any way, shape, or form, did you feel the pressure of that deal and sort of that responsibility to Ultra on the start line, or are you someone that can compartmentalize pretty well?
Oh, I can compartmentalize so well. I can just put everything in a box. Like I had a conversation with Danielle before the race and I was going through some like really emotional stuff and she was like, "Tara, over the Zoom call, she was like, "Tara, I want you to give me all of that." So I physically gave her through the camera all of my emotions. And then she's like, "On race day, we're going to just focus on this one thing." And that's what I do. I'm really good at compartmentalizing, pushing everything down, 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 down far as it could go, and then like bringing it up when it's necessary to go through it. Um, I didn't feel any pressure from the contract. If anything, I felt a lot of support and gratitude, but didn't feel any. I honestly didn't think I even listened to y'all's show afterwards, after Black Canyon. And I didn't feel like anyone was expecting me to be in the top 5. And I wasn't in the top 5 in any of y'all's too. I will say that y'all
We
didn't
missed.
expect me.
We missed
Yeah.
big time.
Was Riley? I actually don't remember. I just was paying attention, obviously, myself. Riley, did you guys put Riley in y'all's top 5?
I think I also missed Riley. My picks across the board I missed. I think Leah and Brett were more in line.
Leah has great picks. She's
She
always
does.
pretty
Leah's
accurate.
dialed. And
Yeah.
she really is. I mean, just a brilliant mind. But I think again, and I actually I said this in an Instagram post, kind of promoting this conversation. I was openly curious about because this is kind of unprecedented, like setting this level of long distance trail record and then translating all of it to like one of the most competitive races on American soil and getting a golden ticket like that. Like what you just did is, I mean, now it's precedented, but until Saturday, like an open question as to whether like the transition could be done, and you crushed it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, all those who are listening, it's possible and you can do it. You can do it.
I think
Just,
that's one of the takeaways. Like just
yeah.
and I know Jasmine has said the same thing after Barkley. Like, yeah, you can take cues from the general public and examples out there, but you kind of have to settle it for yourself, right? Like go find out first.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what sport in general is all about. Just breaking down those barriers, not listening to other people, because it's all words. It's just words. It's not truth. Some of it might be science, but just see what's possible for yourself. Make a goal and try to make it happen. I mean, do everything you can to make it happen.
Too, it's crazy. Like I'm just reminded now, because you mentioned earlier, there were 30 or 40 women on that start line who could have taken a ticket. And it's like pre-race, are you going to bet against Abby Hall, Heather Jackson, MK Sullivan, Shea
So
Aquilano?
true.
Like
Yeah. It keeps
Janet, like
going on.
Lynn, like it's you. So like you have like a 3% chance of getting it right. If
Yeah.
you put
Yeah.
all y'all on an equal pedestal.
I don't want to, just want to say I was pretty happy when, when I was top 3 and, y'all's picks were not correct.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
don't hold that against you. Yeah. All those women, such crushers, 30, 40 women out there, such crushers. It's impossible. I would love to see the fantasy predictions, like who got
Yes.
it the most accurate, because it was up to chance. Honestly, it wasn't up to chance. It was, who was out there to execute, who had a good day, all those factors aligned, who kept going, who kept grinding, whose nutrition was well, who heat trained, all those things. And it just depended on who came out on top. And Riley was on top. And I'm so excited for Riley, by the way. I just want to say that even though me and Riley are like super competitive in a race, like you can't not be happy for Riley. I mean, they have worked so hard. There's no sponsors. If any sponsors are listening, please, like, what's going on there? I don't understand. I don't understand why Riley doesn't have a sponsor. It might be personal. I feel like they would like a sponsor, but just you have to be happy for Riley. It's incredible what they did. 30 minutes off the course record is wild.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, there's so many reasons to partner with someone like Riley, but if you look at their last 2 results at Javelina and Black Canyon, like independent of, for example, social media presence or involvement in the community, like those are 2 performances where any athlete that achieves those positions, like you get a sponsorship purely on performance alone because you've sort of transcended everything. Like a Black Canyon, like it's worthy on performance merits alone, in addition to all the other great stuff. So yeah. Hopefully contract season gets extended in our sport. I know a lot of people are announcing deals, but hopefully we get to like tax season, get to file extensions. So we file an extension here for the brands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Last thing before we wrap up, just obviously you've got Western on the calendar now. Did I hear that you were maybe eyeing the long trail later in the summer? Talk
Yeah,
about that.
I haven't planned a lot. I haven't done a lot of long trail planning. I actually need to reach out to Will Peterson here soon, and I think we're gonna exchange some spreadsheets,
Yeah.
me Appalachian Trail for him and Long Trail for me. Um, but it depends on how much planning I do. If I don't do as much planning, it might be a self-supported record. If I do more planning, then it'll probably be a supported record. But that's going to be sometime in August.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Love that trail, and love that you're at least staying in touch with that aspect of the sport too, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, a goal of
Yeah.
mine every year is to do a long trail, you know,
Okay.
anything over like 200 miles. So that's a goal of mine. Got to do the long trail.
How about Cocodona? Can we get you in Cocodona one of these years?
Yeah, I was actually talking to Jameel. I'm going to talk to Megan about what my year looks like now that
This
I
year
have a
would be
golden
amazing.
ticket.
Join Cocodona this year. The field is bonkers.
Okay, but like how responsible is Cocodona before Western?
I mean, I think we go back to the theme that you mentioned, which is just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it can't be done.
That's so true. Oh
And
man.
you like your fatigue resistance, you might have the best fatigue resistance in the sport as far as I'm concerned. So like I don't think any of the laws of physiology and whatnot apply to you in this case.
So maybe it'll help me. So that's what you're saying. It'll probably help me if I do Cocodona. In that case, probably. I would love to do Cocodona. I would absolutely love to do it. It's such a cool journey through Arizona. Yeah, it's been a goal of mine to do it for years.
Awesome. Well, Tara, great having you on the show. Hopefully we can have you back on, maybe even in studio, depending on how early you get to Olympic Valley for Western, to kind of break down your prep for that race. But overjoyed that you were one of the ticket recipients at Black Canyon. And I guess before we go, any final thoughts, any calls to action for listeners before we go?
Yeah, I think just going back to that theme of like if you are at a start line and there's, so much competition there to just, race the race, but also like anything could happen. Just execute your plan and see what happens. Also, don't let other people's words limit you. I think a big motivator for me, I don't know if it works for everyone, but a big motivator for me is when people say, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if you should do that. Um, like if that's not possible, like that just fuels me even more. So if somebody doubts you, just like let that fuel your fire and let that fuel like your training and your prep going into races specifically. So yeah, I've proven it to myself, and I just hope I inspire others to like go further past like what their perceived limits are.